It's nothing. It's nothing. It's okay.
It's on. It's spooling up. Let me go check it out.
Go ahead, begin. Okay. Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening. Shabbat Sholom. We're still trying out new audio equipment. So hopefully this just gets better and better, at least for the folks at home. And thanks to all of you who are here this evening. Our opening song may be found on page 329, Shomer Yisrael. We have Nicole DiGiorno in the organ seat this evening up in the choir loft, and let's give it a whirl. Page 329. We turn back to pages 2 and 3 and to help us welcome Shabbat with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. It's a pleasure to call upon Barb Rabin. Thank you, Barb. Page 8. I begin with a prayer of gratitude for all that is holy in my life. God needs no words, no English or Hebrew, no semantics, and no services. But I need them. Through prayer, I can sense my inner strength, my inner purpose, my inner joy, my capacity to love. As I reach upward in prayer, I sense these qualities in my Creator. To love God is to love each other, to work and make our lives better. To love God is to love the world created and to work to perfect it. To love God is to love dreams of peace and joy that illumine all of us and to bring that vision to life. Page 10, Yedid Nefesh. Page 12. L'chuner ananal Adonai narir l'tzur yishenu. Come, let us sing joyously to Adonai, raise a shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. For Adonai is a great God, the great ruler of all divine beings. In God's hands are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are God's. God's is the sea, God made it, and the land which God's hands fashioned. Come, let us bow down and kneel, bend the knee before Adonai our Maker. For Adonai is our God, and we are the people God tends, the flock in God's care. Oh, if you would but heed God's charge this day. Shirul Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shirul Adonai, Kol Haaretz. Together on page 14. Sing to Adonai a new song. Sing to Adonai all the earth. Sing to Adonai, bless God's name, proclaim God's victory day after day. Tell of God's glory among the nations, God's wondrous deeds among all peoples. For Adonai is great and much acclaimed. God is held in awe by all divine beings. All the gods of the peoples are mere idols, but Adonai made the heavens. Glory and majesty are before God. Strength and splendor are in God's temple. Let the heavens rejoice and the earth exult. Let the sea and all within it thunder, the fields and everything in them exult. Then shall all the trees of the forest shout for joy at the presence of Adonai. For God is coming to rule the earth. God will rule the world justly and its peoples in faithfulness. Shalom Aleichem on page 24. Page 27, we read silently. Yitkadal v'yitkadal shemei Rabha B'yama divrachirte v'yamlich malchute B'chayechon v'yomechon U'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael Bagala Uvizman kahariv V'imelu Amen Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Ulol Me'amaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach Yitparit Ramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yaleh V'yithalal Shemei Dekudesha Barichu Leila Mekol Birchata V'shirata Tushvichata V'nechemata Damiram Biolma Vimaru. Amen. Page 28, we stand now for the Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Praise Adonai, to whom praise is due forever. Praise be Adonai, to whom praise is due now and forever. Top of 31 together. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim. At the middle of 33, responsively, wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. Then this holiest of your works in the living language that gives it form. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. Please be seated. V'afta'et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta ba'am, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, u'lechlecha v'aderech, v'shochbecha v'kumecha, v'kshartam leot ayadecha, v'hayu l'todafot b'neinecha, u'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha v'visharecha, l'man tizkaruhu v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, hitem kadoshim le'elohechem, ani hi Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzei tiechem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem l'Elohim, ani hi Adonai Elohechem. Amen. Together, you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. ונאמר כי אדוני את יעקב, ולא מיחזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukkah shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time. We turn to page 155 and stand now for the Amidah. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, V'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. We continue reading silently through page 165 in the silent prayer. You may be seated when you so wish, and we will continue with Oseh Sholom on page 167. We turn ahead to page 253, even as we turn our thoughts to those who are not with us this evening, those who are ill, those who are healing. We include in our prayers ongoing good wishes for Kenny Elliott, April and Judy Foster, Grady Holly, and Maggie Moscato, and of course Debbie Weiner, who is back home and seems to be on an even keel and getting better all the time. Are there others whose names we'd like to keep in our thoughts? Harvey?
Nick Corey, Rob Zimmerman, Elaine Phillips.
Very well. Very well. Mishaberach Avatenu V'Matenu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rechel Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say, Amen. We sure missed the choir, but Nicole, you are a blessing. It was one of those weeks, there have been more than a few during this pandemic, when my mood ranged from the blahs to the blues. Sure, I tried out a new recipe for ratatouille and helped celebrate a friend's birthday, but when it came time to think about a sermon, my gas tank was running on low for ideas, and there just wasn't much going on out there to inspire me. Just more stuff about COVID, the usual hijinks from the Oval Office, the usual silence from Biden's basement until his nomination of a vice presidential candidate, and an upcoming weekend trip to Jeffrey up in Madison, which is really not much to get excited about since it involves renting a truck and some heavy lifting, moving furniture up to his new apartment. True, there were a couple of truly glorious sunsets earlier in the week, and my yard is looking unusually lush for this time in August, but that was hardly enough for a sermon. Then when I went to have a look at the Torah portion, it turned out to be Re'eh. Now, Re'eh is a very nice Torah reading, to be sure, so nice, in fact, that we read it again in a few weeks' time on Yom Kippur. Not wishing to be redundant next month, I figured I should leave be the Torah reading for now. And then I found something which got me genuinely excited and which I want to share with you tonight. It's a recently drafted and published document called the Philadelphia Statement. And it is the result of a diverse working group of prominent thinkers, scholars, and practitioners. You can check it out at thephillystatement.org. As to its need and its purpose, the website declares, the Philadelphia Statement affirms the uniquely American commitment to free speech. In today's cancel culture, people and groups of goodwill are too often demonized or blacklisted simply for expressing their views. This needs to stop. In these turbulent and polarized times, we must recommit to principles of freedom that inspire peaceful coexistence rather than division. Freedom of speech is a fundamental right and source of strength and unity for our nation, but increasingly under assault. The rise in blacklisting and demonizing of those who hold opposing views is steadily eroding the will of Americans to express their sincere beliefs and respect those with whom they disagree. This erosion cannot continue. The Philadelphia Statement seeks to inspire a movement committed to principles of freedom that are necessary for human flourishing throughout our society. If that has whetted your appetite to hear more, let me share with you the declaration in its entirety. And my use of the word declaration is deliberate because there is something about its spirit that is somehow reminiscent of the Declaration of Independence. Social media mobs, cancel culture, campus speech policing, these are all part of life in today's America. Freedom of expression is in crisis. Truly open discourse, the debates, exchange of ideas, and arguments on which the health and flourishing of a democratic republic crucially depend, is increasingly rare. Ideologues demonize opponents to block debates on important issues and to silence people with whom they disagree. We must ask ourselves, is this the country we want? Surely not. We want, and to be true to ourselves, we need to be a nation in which we and our fellow citizens of many different faiths, philosophies, and persuasions can speak their minds and honor their deepest convictions without fear of punishment and retaliation. If we seek a brighter future, we must relearn a fundamental truth. Our liberty and our happiness depend upon the maintenance of a public culture in which freedom and civility coexist, where people can disagree robustly, even fiercely, yet treat each other as human beings, and indeed as fellow citizens, not mortal enemies. Liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist, Frederick Douglass declared in 1860. Indeed, our liberal democracy is rooted in and dependent upon the shared understanding that all people have inherent dignity and worth, and that they must be treated accordingly. A society that lacks comity and allows people to be shamed or intimidated into self-censorship of their ideas and considered judgments will not survive for long. As Americans, we desire a flourishing, open marketplace of ideas, knowing that it is the fairest and most effective way to separate falsehood from truth. Accordingly, dissenting and unpopular voices, be they of the left or the right, must be afforded the opportunity to be heard. They have often guided our society toward more just positions, which is why Frederick Douglass said freedom of speech is the great moral renovator of society and government. The American tradition of freedom of expression, complete with its attendant responsibilities, is our school for democratic citizenship. It trains us to think critically, to defend our ideas, and at the same time to be considerate of others whose creeds and convictions differ from our own. It enables us to learn from and peacefully live with one another despite differences. It further instills in us an understanding that the mere exposure to ideas we find offensive is not an act of violence. And it admonishes us that if we value the freedom of expression, we must extend the same measure of freedom to others, even to those whom we believe have gone very wrong in their thinking. Tragically, we are losing these defining features of our democracy. Common decency and free speech are being dismantled through the stigmatizing practice of blacklisting ideological opponents, which has taken on the conspicuous form of hate labeling. Responsible organizations are castigated as hate groups. Honest people of good faith are branded hate agents. Even mainstream ideas are marginalized as hate speech. This threatens our ability to listen, discuss, debate, and grow. Blacklisting is spreading. Corporations are enacting hate speech policies to protect people from wrong and harmful content. Similarly, colleges and universities are imposing speech regulations to make students safe, not from physical harm, but from challenges to campus orthodoxy. These policies and regulations assume that we as citizens are unable to think for ourselves and to make independent judgments. Instead of teaching us to engage, they foster conformism, groupthink, and train us to respond to intellectual challenges with one or another form of censorship. Humanity has repeatedly tried expunging undesirable beliefs and ideas. What self-appointed speech arbiters whether in the majority or in the minority, fail to grasp is that they will likely eventually become the targets. The winds inevitably shift, sometimes rapidly. The question is whether civility norms and free speech safeguards will remain in place to protect them, or whether they will become victims of the dangerous precedents they themselves have established and advanced. To be sure, our free speech tradition is not absolutist. It does not embrace certain limited categories of speech such as defamation, obscenity, intimidation, and threats, or incitement to violence. Yet the idea of hate speech exceptions to free speech principles is foreign to our free speech ideals, impossible to define, and often used by those wielding political, economic, or cultural power to silence dissenting voices. That is why we must favor openness, to allow ideas and beliefs the chance to be assessed on their own merits. And we must be willing to trust that bad ideas will be corrected not through censorship, but through better arguments. If we seek to change our country's trajectory, if we desire unity rather than division, if we want a political life that is productive and inspiring, if we aspire to be a society that is pluralistic and free, one in which we can forge our own paths and live according to our own consciences, then we must renounce ideological blacklisting and recommit ourselves to steadfastly defending freedom of speech and passionately promoting robust civil discourse. Now that's quite a lot to take in one reading. So you may wish to go home and read over the copy of this sermon in your email, or as I said earlier, go to thephillystatement.org. If you agree with that statement, then go online and sign it, as I have already done, along with a great many others, including some highly prestigious individuals of all stripes and from all walks of society. Share the statement with your friends and become an ambassador for free speech and civility. And why is it called the Philadelphia Statement? In its own words, the city of Philadelphia has played a pivotal role in the history of our great nation. Men of diverse views who often had fierce disagreements with each other gathered in Philadelphia to declare independence from the English crown in 1776. And again in 1787, they gathered to debate and sign the Constitution in the turbulent aftermath of the American Revolution. Philadelphia calls to mind the timeless principle of free speech enshrined in the Constitution and carries with it the memory of America's founders who, despite their significant differences, mutually pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to give future generations a chance at liberty. The Philadelphia Statement calls upon all Americans to preserve the freedom to disagree openly while maintaining the possibility of a shared future alongside those with whom we differ. This is what the framers achieved in Philadelphia at the founding, and it is what we must now work to restore amid these challenging times in our country. My dear friends, I had goosebumps reading about this endeavor and the document that it has produced. And then I turned back to this week's Torah portion. Re'eh, you may recall, has a long list of mitzvot to be observed. It then offers us a choice of whether to observe or not. It tells us that these commandments are not far away or out of reach, and that it is incumbent upon us to choose life over death, good over evil, blessing over curse. Commenting on this parsha, Rabbi Rachel Sabbath Beit Halachmi writes, "In our current reality, it is ever more urgent to define who we are and what, at our core, we are about as Jews. What is it that makes us who we are? Despite all our complexities, however, I still believe we can say something very clear about who we are, an Am Kadosh, a holy people. I believe that at its core, Judaism primarily strives to achieve two particular goals: the ethical development of human beings and the establishment of an ethical society. For the Deuteronomist, who you are is defined by what you do. So the Deuteronomist insists we show that we love God through particular ethical and ritual practices and by resisting other practices. Choosing the good over and over again, as this Torah portion repeats like a chorus, defines each of us as being of this particular Israelite nation. Other nations have their particular ways of being, and we have ours. I believe that very much the same might be said of our identities as Americans. Who we are is defined by what we do. The Constitution is the American people's Torah. And surely we can all agree that one of the most fundamental mitzvot of American life is that of the right of free expression, non-coerced, and shared in a climate of civility. If you agree, I urge you to visit the website and sign the statement. And remember this: the Philadelphia Statement is a starting point, not a destination. Not unlike our Torah, the Philadelphia Statement is much more than a document. It's the catalyst for an ongoing, ideologically diverse movement working to build a culture where the open exchange of ideas is universally respected and where civil discourse is widely practiced throughout our society. The statement is a clarion call to act on these shared values by prizing free speech and civil discourse while simultaneously resisting illiberal calls for censorship and blacklisting. Let us be among those that answer that call. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. And together let us say, Amen. The Kiddush may be found on pages 4 and 5 of your prayer books. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kadsho b'ahava uvratzon hichilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila l'mikrei kodesh, zecher l'tziyat mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta, v'otanu kidashta, mikol hamim, v'shabbat kadshecha, v'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha'shabbat. L'chaim. Page 283, we stand for the Aleinu. Let us adore the ever-living God and render praise unto you, who spreads out the heavens and established the earth, whose glory is revealed in the heavens above, and whose greatness is manifest throughout the world. You are our God, there is none else. Va'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu, Yeh Adonai echad, Ushemo, echad. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Please choose from among the various meditations beginning on page 288. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at the season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. As the name of your loved one is called out, you're invited to stand if you wish, and when all names have been read out, we will stand together for Kaddish. On this Shabbat, our hearts go out especially to the family of John O. Spence over the course of this last year. And from across the years, we recall the names of Hilda K. Ballin, Catherine Broida, Henny Bergheim, Harvey E. Kane, Robert Feldstein, Caroline M. Flesch, Robert Goodwin, Irwin H. Grant, Henrietta Hammersloff, Miriam Hess, Henrietta Lilienstein, Jack Metnick, Julius M. Myers, Louis M. Myers, Andy Opfelman, Jerome Robinson, Rose Dogan Wald, M. Byron Bud Weisbaum, and Ilya Zavelsky, the artside of whose passing takes place at this season of the year. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for blessing. And together let us now stand and turn to page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, b'olma divrach iritev yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram bi'olama v'imru amen. Yehei shlam al rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to those who mourn, and comfort all who are bereaved among us. As together we say, Amen. Please be seated. Closing song on page 321. That will be Adon Olam. Just a reminder that I believe this week, it's not in the program here. I believe it's this Wednesday that Federation is doing this program. An interview with Elie Wiesel by Mr. Reich, I don't know, something about the audacity of hope or something like that, is it? Anyway, it's a Federation-sponsored event. It's at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, and it's on Zoom, so everybody can attend. All right, our closing song, Adon Olam, page 321. Yitzir Nihira Yeit Nasa Sukho Ahlora Ruhaya Behuliye Vara Sheni Baham Shila Vira Tur Kevli Sama Runisi Ruhi Beati Sham Viara Imruhi Viati Adonai Ozle Amo Yiten Adonai Yavarech Amo Vashalom. The Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people and all the peoples of the world with peace. Amen. And Shabbat Shalom.